So we'll be starting sharp at 11. So we are already live on YouTube. Yes, sir. Sir, आप unmute.
Hello and good morning to everyone. I am Arun Verma, Director Finance of Human Rights Emissions of Tobacco Control. Today's event is being organized by Strategic Institute of Public Health Education and Research, CIFER, Resource Center for Tobacco Control, RCTC, the Department of Community Medicine and School of Public Health, GMR, Chandigarh, and the Union International Union Against Tobacco, Against Tuberculosis and Lung Diseases. On the board today we have panel of well-known and eminent jurists who are persons of high repute and their field of working and authority on to this subject. We are fortunate to have a very prominent personality and an authority on human rights, Honorable Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari, as our chief guest. Today's panel discussion will be moderated by Dr. Rakesh Gupta, President CIFER, and Dr. Sonu Goyal, Professor, Department of Community Medicine and School of Public Health, GMR Chandigarh, as well Director, Resource Center for the Control. Dr. Rana J.C., Regional Deputy Director Union, who is an expert on this subject, will present. We all know tobacco violates human rights. One of the rights violated by tobacco industry is the right to life. Related to this is the right to health and clean and healthy environment. Tobacco industry is responsible for killing half of consumers and targeting children to get them addicted when they are so young. In fact, human rights violation for a child who smokes, parents start even before birth, as she gets exposed to tobacco smoke while still in the mother's womb. After birth, exposure to second-hand smoke denies the child the right to say no to it, as we still do not have a law that prevents smoking at home. Thus, even before being born and then during childhood, she has hardly any right to oppose health hazardous smoking at home. But the violation do not end here. As the tobacco industry starts targeting children of very young age, globally there is around 10% prevalence of smoking at the age of 13 years. Is it rational to believe that such a young child knows that what she is buying could lead to a lifelong addiction of this poisonous product and to diseases like cancer, respiratory, heart diseases 20, 30 years down the line. Tobacco control actions by the government needs to underline the health is an important rights issue, and a willful denial of it by anyone, whether by the tobacco industry or by tobacco consumers, is a breach of right to good health. There is a need to adopt human rights-based approach to tobacco control at individual, community, and country level. Tobacco use is the leading cause of preventable deaths in the world. A human right approach to ending tobacco is unique because it implores or requires government to protect their citizens by implementing tobacco control laws and strategies to end the tobacco epidemic based on legal binding human rights norms. Human rights and tobacco control are synergistic and mutually reinforcing. They have both evolved separately and have been elevated singly at global levels in parallel. And it is now time to unite and create strong linkage between these two agendas. A human right-based approach transforms the paradigm for development. It shifts our approach from responding to needs to realizing rights. The reality is that tobacco is an addictive killer. It threatens the health and well-being of those exposed to it. Government must act boldly to control tobacco, not only as a part of their obligation to safeguard the fundamental rights to health of their citizens, but also because of the staggering cost to society that are consequences of tobacco use and exposure to secondhand smoke. That's why the tobacco industries are not just to tobacco control. Rather, we should have come to realization and reaffirm our arguments to propose that threat by tobacco industries are also threat against human rights and right to health. It is the government obligation to empower the people, protect its citizens, respect their rights. It must fulfill the rights by recognizing tobacco as a human right violation. Quote Dr. Meera Biagi da Costa Silvia, head of the Secretariat of WHO FCTC. A better understanding of how tobacco control and human rights interact means a better understanding of our abilities. Strengthen the WHO framework of Convention on Tobacco Control implementation. In this background, we have planned a national consultation on human rights dimensions of tobacco control, a tool to advance WHO FCTC implementation. This virtual consultation will be live on the Facebook. Questions by the participant can be posted on the chat box, which will be answered by the participant depending on the availability of the time. Otherwise, answers to their queries will be sent to them individually on the emails, personal emails. Now I request Dr. Rakesh Gupta to present the welcome address. Next slide, please. Yeah, Dr. Rakesh Gupta is President and Director of Public Health Strategic Institute for Public Health Education and Research, CIFER. Formerly, he was a Director of Health Services and Director of Chemical Examining Lab, Punjab. He is an alumni of John Hopkins School of Public Health, Baltimore 2012 and University of California, San Francisco 2012 as a short-time scholar. He has won many awards and recognitions, and to name the few, WHO Award 2015 on the World No Tobacco Day. He represented Ministry of Health and Family Welfare for a consultation on in Panama 2016. He represented Ministry of Health and Family Welfare again for a consultation in Geneva 2017. State Bank of India bestowed him with award of exemplary service in the medical profession 2019. Dr. Rakesh Gupta.
Yeah, thank you, Varma. Next slide, please. Yeah. So it is my proud privilege to welcome our chief guest, Honorable Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari, eminent subject experts, Dr. Meera Biagi, behavioral scientist and communication expert of international repute, Dr. Pankaj Chaturvedi, Deputy Director and Head and Neck Surgeon, TMH Mumbai, Dr. Rana J. Singh, Deputy Regional Director, the Union, Dr. Amit Yadav, Senior Technical Advisor, the Union, Mr. Ranjit Singh, Attorney at Law in the Supreme Court of India, and Ms. Radhika Srivastava. She is Director, Health Promotion at Hriday. I also welcome Mr. Arun Verma, Director of Finance and Operations, CIFER, and Professor Dr. Sonu Goyal, Professor and Director, FCTC PJMER, who lead our team, and all the participants who are joined through Zoom or through YouTube. So thank you.
So please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rakesh, for a warm welcome. I'm sure your warm words will give a comfort to our participant on this cold morning day. Thank you so much. Now I invite Dr. Sonu Goyal to share the objective of today's consultation. Dr. Sonu Goyal is Director of RCTC, that is Resource Center Tobacco Control, Chandigarh. He is a professor in the Department of Community Medicine and School of Public Health, PJMR, Chandigarh. He has more than 2 decades of vast experience in public health and health management. He is an alumnus of the John Hopkins School of Public Health, Baltimore, US, and Maastricht University, the Netherlands. He was awarded Public Health Excellence of India by Honorable Union Minister of Health and Family Welfare in 2014. He is a program director for International Public Health Management Development Program sponsored by the Ministry of External Affairs. Over to Dr. Sonu.
Thank you, Mr. Verma, and a very warm welcome to all the participants and the panelists in this important consultation. So I think we will be having a round of discussion during this important consultation on human rights dimension. But I would like to deliberate upon briefly about what this consultation is. I think most of you are very well versed about the fact that tobacco is a killer which kills almost 13 lakh people in India every year. And if we say across globe, so 8 million people are killed every year, out of which 7 million by direct smoking and around 1 million by secondhand smoke. So it is the only product which kills half of its user. And the best part is, this is the worst part, the best part is that it is a preventable risk factor. So we can prevent the tobacco use just by stopping its initiation early on and quitting whenever that person wants to quit. So for that, every country had made their laws, but before the laws, there is a framework. We had a WHO framework convention on tobacco control, and those who are in tobacco control thing, everybody knows about this framework convention. It is a tool for effective implementation of tobacco control laws in a country. So, but very few among us, even in tobacco control, know the fact that FCTC is a derivative of International Human Rights Convention. So very few people know about this fact. And unlike international convention, but unlike various international convention, FCTC doesn't have enforcement mechanisms. So FCTC is various, in any of the international rights, we have some enforcement mechanism, but FCTC doesn't have a strong enforcement mechanisms. So this is the purpose of this particular workshop, that we should be able to provide the recommendation to the government and a representation to the National Human Rights Commission that we should abide by the principle of this international rights or human rights, and abide by the same principle which applies to our health, to tobacco control. And as it has been reported in the 8th session of the Conference of Party, the Secretariat of WHO FCTC, that we need synergies of tobacco control with human rights. It's not that the tobacco control is separate and human rights are separate. We have human rights in tobacco control as well. And these efforts came as a response to the decision adopted by this COP, Conference of Party, in its 7th session, which invite the Secretariat to collaborate with the business and human right mechanism and processes within the United Nations to protect public health interests from commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry, which do not want the strict International Human Rights Convention to be a part of the tobacco control. So the purpose of this workshop is twofold. One, we need to make people aware about the fact that we in FCTC, which is a derivative of International Human Rights Convention, should abide by the principles of human rights. And second, we want to do advocacy, we want to do sensitization of the government and all the stakeholders who are related to this particular sector, that yes, we need to do something on human rights issues as well as we are doing in other activities of tobacco control. So I would like to welcome again our panelists of this session and the audience who are in the YouTube, who are watching this important webinar on human rights dimensions of tobacco control. And I'm pretty sure that all the experts in this forum, as deliberated by Dr. Rakesh Gupta, will throw lights on various dimensions of various human rights dimensions of tobacco control. So over to Dr. Rakesh Gupta. Mr. Aruna.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonu, for giving a detailed introduction and insight on today's subject of consultation. Thank you very much. Now I invite Dr. Ranjit Singh, who is an expert on the subject, to present an overview on the subject of today's consultation. Dr. Ranjit Singh, he is a Deputy Regional Director, Tobacco and NCT Control at International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Diseases. He is a medical doctor with MD in pulmonary medicine. He has more than 3 decades of experience in public health, focusing on management and tobacco control. He is a master trainer of courses for mid and senior level managers. He is currently supporting tobacco and NCT control programs in the Southeast Asia region. Now over to Dr. Ranjit Singh. Is Dr. Ranjit Singh around?
Yes, Varmaji. Yes. So can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So thank you once again. Respected Chief Guest, Justice Iqbal, and all the dignitaries in this webinar. So first of all, Varmaji, disclaimer that I am not a human rights expert. So as hello, yes. So can you hear me? Yes. So yes, we are working in tobacco control on various aspects of tobacco control, but not as such. What are the human rights issues related to tobacco use, and that is why this webinar is there. So as Dr. Goel already mentioned, that tobacco is perhaps the only product in our society which kills 50% of its users. Which kills 50% of its users. Very important and very small and very important statement. There is no such product which kills 50% of its own users. So with this, I think I would like to take you to the various stages of tobacco use life cycle. Next, please. Next, please. Yes. And what are the human rights violations in different stages of tobacco use life cycle? Next, please. You see, these are the 4 stages of tobacco use. First is tobacco growing and curing. Second is tobacco product manufacturing and distribution. Third is tobacco product consumption. And fourth is tobacco products post-consumption waste. There are many environmental and health concerns at each of these stages, leading to human rights violation. And this has been beautifully explained in the article, the environmental and health impacts of tobacco, agriculture, cigarette manufacturing, and consumption, which was there in the bulletin of World Health Organization in 2015. So these are the 4 stages, and we will see what are the human rights violations happening at different stages. Next, please. First is tobacco cultivation and curing. All of you are aware of health effects in farmers and laborers who are at risk of nicotine toxicity, green tobacco sickness, which we call, which is due to handling of tobacco leaves without protection during harvesting and processing. So in this green tobacco sickness, a person can have a nausea, vomiting, dizziness, headache. There is difficulty in sleeping and eating. Then second is about damage to environment. Very important. So this is very important aspect where tobacco growing leads to deforestation, soil depletion, loss of soil nutrients. And then pollution due to heavy use of agrochemicals, tobacco growing, which usually involves substantial use of chemicals, including pesticides, fertilizers, and various growth regulators. So these chemicals may affect drinking water sources as a result of runoff from tobacco growing areas. And third is, which is related to tobacco cultivation and curing, is socioeconomic issues. There is widespread concern about unfair labor practices and human rights violation in tobacco agriculture. They don't receive adequate living wages and fair price for their tobacco leaves. Then safety of children involved in tobacco farming, farm laborers, farm workers, especially child laborers, minorities, and migrant workers. So these are the issues which involves human rights at the time of growing and curing of tobacco. Then various socio-economic issues are also related to this. Widespread concern about, I think this we have already discussed. Next, please. Next, please. Yes, then second stage is manufacturing and distribution of tobacco products. And there is one data that since 1995, globally it is estimated that for cigarette production alone, because from our country where we use other products, that is BD and smokeless tobacco, we don't have enough data. But from cigarette production alone, tobacco factories, they would have produced and deposited a total of, 45 million tons of solid waste, 6 million tons of nicotine waste, although it's there, but again it is deposited somewhere. Almost 4 million tons of chemical waste during this time from that. Other toxic byproducts of tobacco manufacturing or chemical used in manufacturing include ammonia, hydrochloric acid, toluene, and methyl ethyl ketone, etc. Next, please. Third stage is about tobacco product consumption. So this is very important stage. Here, you're all aware of health effects of tobacco, and we do not remind you that tobacco affects almost every organ of our body from head to toe. There are direct health effects. Then there are health impact of secondhand smoke exposure, which leads to lung cancer, cardiovascular diseases, pulmonary diseases. Then exposure to residual chemicals in environment where smoking has been taken place. Then there are environmental effects. Only for consuming cigarette, almost 6 trillion cigarettes are consumed globally each year. 6 trillion cigarettes. And that would require about 9 million trees to produce 3 trillion matchboxes. 3 trillion matchboxes are required. Similarly, using lighters, which has again an environmental impact of manufacturing and disposing of the plastic, metal, and butane, which is used in making cigarettes, so that they also cause environmental effects related to tobacco product consumption. Next, please. Again, it is an important cause of fire globally. Tobacco use is an important cause of smoking is an important cause of fire. For example, we don't have enough data from our countries, but in countries like United Kingdom, almost 7% of fires, please see it's a big number, 7% of fires related to tobacco use. That only 34 deaths per 1,000 fires are because of tobacco consumption. Similarly, in countries like United States of America, 8 to 10% of all fires are because of smoking. And huge, there is direct property damage because of smoking. Next, please. And it leads directly to emission of, please see, 2.6 million tons of carbon dioxide and about 5.2 tons of methane, cigarette tobacco consumption, that leads to this much of environmental hazard. Next, please. Next, please. Then tobacco product post-consumption waste. I think in the last few years, it has got a lot of attention now. In India, we use four kinds of products, although e-cigarette is now banned. It is cigarette, BD, and smokeless tobacco. Please see how much tobacco waste is generated because of that. From cigarette alone, we have cigarette butts and filters, acetate, cellulose acetate, paper or rain wrapping, which is there, which is used to hold together by glue. Then a lot of empty packs, advertisement, promotion inserts. Similarly, BD, smokeless tobacco, plastic packaging material, retail and wholesale pouches, plaster boxes and tin packs. So this whole amount of tobacco product waste is generated. Next, please. Next, please. So these are the few pictures which you see everywhere, all around. Next, please. Cigarette waste, paper, foils, wrappers. This is about smokeless tobacco. You find so much plastic pouches and tin boxes around. You see the electronic cigarette, although this is not, now it is in India. We know there is prohibition of e-cigarette act. So it is now banned, but a lot of e-cigarette waste is being there. And cigarette butts is really very, very important. And already now we have a order from NGT that how to control, and the Center for the Center Ministry Pollution Control, they are developing the guidelines to control the tobacco product waste. And in India alone, more than 100 billion cigarette butts are being dumped every year. 100 billion cigarette butts. Next, please. So cigarette litter poison, you are all aware that cigarette butts contain all of the carcinogenic chemicals, pesticides, and nicotine that make tobacco use the leading cause of preventable death. And these chemicals can remain in the water and soil for up to 10 years. Next, please. So this is a possible pathway for human health risk due to tobacco product waste. So it reaches almost everyone. Next, please. So in the end, I would only share that there is fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the tobacco industry's interest and public health policy, as explained in FCTC Article 5.3. There are human rights violations to health, to good environment, to good surroundings at every stage of tobacco use life cycle. So there are 4 stages, and you find that at every stage there are human rights violations. Tobacco use violates the right to a standard of living, adequate for health and well-being of a person. So in such an environment, a person cannot live in a healthy and in an environment which is good for his or her family. It also includes food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social service. So all these rights are being violated because of tobacco use. So what is important? We need to explain to stakeholders the link between the fundamental human rights violation due to tobacco use and right to tobacco control. Why tobacco control is required? You see, we are already working for the last more than 2 decades here in our country, and globally, maybe few countries are working for the last more than 5 decades for control of tobacco. So whether our current approach is quite adequate, or we need to explore all angles to ensure that tobacco use can be squeezed from all sides. So we need to see those links, and states, that is countries and their citizens, must be empowered. We need to, that is why this workshop is there. We need to empower our stakeholders with the knowledge, resources, and ability to claim their rights. So this is how we need to educate our people, that how they can claim their rights and resist the tobacco industry's corporate social responsibility, corporate social investment, or outright briberies that can inhibit the realization of such rights. And finally, that is why this workshop, and we feel that human right-based approach to tobacco control is perhaps an important strategy in current circumstances also, and the times to come. So this is overall our feeling. Again, I would like to just share that with our chair, Justice Iqbal, that we are basically from tobacco control, and we are just trying to explore. We have now experts here from different field, so we want the guidance how we can achieve, how we can use various legislation already shared by Dr. Sonu Goyal. He mentioned about international covenant on civil and political rights, international covenant on economic, social and cultural rights. He also mentioned about convention on elimination on discrimination against women, and convention on right of the child rights 1989, and our own FCTC article 5.3. So these are few legislations which can help us really to move forward. But we need guidance. We need guidance how to move forward on this aspect. So thank you once again. Thank you, Vermaji. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rana. Thank you, Dr. Rana, for a detailed presentation on the harms of tobacco consumption and its ill effects on users' health, as well on the society at large, including the human rights violations. Thank you so much. Now I request Dr. Rakesh Gupta to please introduce the jurist to our participants. Dr. Rakesh Gupta.
Thank you, Vermaji. So, Dr. Amit Yadav is with us. He's a senior technical advisor at the International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Diseases. He's a postdoctoral scholar, Center for Tobacco Control Research and Education, CTCRE, University of California, San Francisco. He is a doctorate in law from the National Law School of India, University, Bangalore, India. He is an alumni of Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, Baltimore, and the National Cancer Institute and American University of Beirut. He has worked with Hriday, New Delhi, PHFI, WHO, FCTC Global Knowledge Hub on SLT. He was also an elected member of the board of directors of the Framework Convention Alliance, representing CRO. So next. So our next panelist is Dr. Meera Biagi. She's a very senior tobacco control expert, and she is a behavioral scientist and communication expert. Her outstanding work as a researcher, community health educator, and advocate to prevent tobacco-related diseases has been honored by numerous awards, including the International Network of Women Against Tobacco Tribute for Outstanding Service to Women in 2009 and the Luther Terry Award in 2012. She was also the first woman from Asia to receive the WHO Gold Medal. She is an visiting scientist, Harvard School of Public Health, Boston. Dr. Agi has served as a consultant or advisor for numerous global health organizations, including WHO. So next. So Dr. Pankaj Chaturvedi has just joined us straight from his OT. He is head and neck cancer surgeon and deputy director at Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. He has also been invited as a visiting faculty in 44 institutes in 32 countries. He is the editor of the textbook of head and neck surgery and is the associate editor of the International Journal of Head and Neck Surgery. He has authored more than 200 papers in international peer-reviewed journals. He has received several awards: Excellence in Cancer Care Award, Nana Palkar Samruti Award for Excellence in Patient Care, and many other awards he has got. Dr. Chaturvedi is the founder of Maharashtra Cancer Warrior, that is offering voluntary oncology services in 24 district hospitals of Maharashtra. So next. Mr. Ranjit Singh, he is attorney at law in the Supreme Court of India. He has been providing consultancy, support, guidance to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, National Institute for Cancer Prevention and Research, and civil societies on public health laws for more than a decade. He has specialization in litigation related to tobacco control and food safety and standard laws. Mr. Singh has contributed in drafting the law enforcers guidelines on the tobacco control for Government of India and has published several study journals, articles on tobacco control and food safety legislation. Next. So Radhika Srivastava, she is a director health promotion at Hriday, health-related information dissemination amongst youth. Hriday is a non-profit organization engaged in multidisciplinary research, capacity building, and campaigns linked to the prevention and control of NCDs. At Hriday, her work focuses on addressing NCDs from a health and development perspective, particularly in the context of the SDGs. She has already 2 decades of experience in planning and implementing evidence-based health promotion interventions and campaigns. Ms. Srivastava has also held positions in UNICEF and at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences and the Public Health Foundation of India. So I welcome all the panelists. So let us have a question and answer session from the panelists. So first we'll ask questions from Dr. Meera Biagi. So Dr. Meera, are you with us? Dr. Meera?
Yes.
Dr. Meera, will you tell us how the tobacco industry violates women's human rights? It is your pet subject.
Tobacco is a human rights and women's and girls' right issue. This has been accepted widely. Tobacco and the actions of the tobacco industry violate a number of women's rights. And the most important among them is the health right. Tobacco advertising and actions of the tobacco industry, they are a barrier to the rights of health of women, and it prevents them to enjoy the highest attainable standard of health. And how do they do that? Women are not informed, or they are misinformed on what tobacco does to them. Those women who use tobacco, they do not understand, either they are misinformed or they are not informed at all. Then the tobacco industry makes tobacco products luring and seductive for women. They make tobacco use as an acceptable family practice. They will show men smoking at home and women sitting nearby knitting sweaters or cutting vegetables. So it is an acceptable kind of a atmosphere at home. They also use the most glamorous women to make advertisements for tobacco. This is to make women feel, who look at these advertisements, to make them feel that they will also look like that. They will also be very good looking. They would be also very confident looking if they use tobacco. So they misinform them. They fulfill women's needs in terms of what tobacco can help them on. Like to the urban women, to the educated women, they will say that it is going to make them empowerment. They are going to look very smart and so on and so forth. But then there are the disadvantaged women who are not informed what tobacco does to them, or they are misinformed. They are told that, tobacco would be good for you. It will calm you down when somebody is attacking you. Your husband is shouting at you. So instead of shouting back at him, which you cannot because it is our culture, so you just can use tobacco and calm yourself down. Besides the secondhand smoke in women, secondhand has a significant health implication for women, especially in the reproductive health group. But what happens? Women are exposed to SHS, passive smoking, at the workplace. Men don't care that women are there, they keep on smoking. And then at home, they have no power to ask their husbands that they should stop smoking. Even though the women and men might be well informed about the ill effects of secondhand smoke, but they are saying that it is at public places. They don't realize that there are people even at home, and it could be even a public place for the servants who serve at your house, and also the health of the family people is the same as the health of anybody else. So why should they not care about the health of the women at home and they smoke? Women and tobacco control policies also have a lot to desire, because when policies are made, women are not consciously asked to get involved in that so that they can have a voice. For example, look at cessation. We know that women do not take up cessation take up tobacco for the same reason as men do. They take it up for different reasons. So but when the principles of cessations are defined, they only look at men. How do they take it? And so the quitting strategies are designed only after that. And they do not apply to women. And then women are criticized that women do not give up smoking, or they do not give up chewing tobacco at the same rate as men. Even when you work very hard with them. The problem is that they are never involved. They are never asked, why do you smoke? How can you give it up? What would make you give it up? These are the kinds of questions that they need to ask women, but nobody asks them. And we know that the needs of women are very different than the needs of men. So they do not understand that women take up tobacco not for the same reason that men do. For example, the men, they look at one another and they have friends smoking, and so they take up smoking. In the case of women, poor thing, it's not always. Of course, there are women who are on the upper strata of society and they are urban. They look at other girls and they start smoking too. But there are women who do not know how to take shelter, how to console themselves. So they take up habits like this because the tobacco industry sort of misinforms them that it will calm you down. If you are excited, it will calm you down. It will make you concentrate on your work and so on and so forth. So this is what happens among the disadvantaged women and among the higher group women. And so both ways, they are misinformed or they are not informed. They are never told what happens, that they would get addicted if they smoke or if they chew tobacco. So all these things are hidden from them. Thank you.
I think you explained your viewpoint very nicely. And we know that it is your pet subject regarding women's human rights. So thanks a lot. Dr. Sonu, now you can ask questions from, actually, Amit Yadav. He has to attend another meeting. So can we take up questions for Amit Yadav before Dr. Pankaj? Next, yeah, Rajiv.
Yeah. So thank you, Meera ji. I think you have nicely explained about the inequality which has been there when the tobacco control is concerned, human rights is concerned with respect to women. So I think these are the questions which pertain to something related to law, and our Chief Justice, the expert, Justice Iqbal Ahmed, I think he has also fought some cases on that, might have also. So I think there are some questions which I would like to pose to Mr. Amit and followed by Ranjit, is like, what are the national and international human rights obligations? If we consider tobacco control, in tobacco control, what are the international and national human rights obligation, and what are these obligations pertaining to India? Amit. Amit, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Sonu. I was trying to do that. And thank you very much for giving this opportunity to be part of this important discussion. And it's very easy to talk after Dr. Agi, and she has very clearly pointed out how human rights, in terms of issues, are related when we talk about tobacco and gender. And it does affect every aspect of human life. It kills the very basic fact that it kills more than 13.5 lakh Indians every year. Highlights the right to life issue. Because it is, and science suggests that it is preventable death. So any kind of preventable death, and if it is happening, it's obviously is human rights violation, and there could be different aspects to it. I think we have realized and we have agreed to these basic tenets with the adoption of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and UDHR in 1948 itself. And thereafter, our constitution is also almost a replica of the rights that have been accepted. Under the UDHR, and we have also adopted that under the Indian Constitution. We have reiterated, and as a global community, we have reiterated the right to health and to achieve the highest standards of health under different conventions and international treaties, including the CEDAW, which is related to women's rights, and CRC, which is related to child rights. So, even for rights of people living with disability, and we have agreed that the highest standard of health is one of the fundamental rights for everyone. The key issues when we talk about human rights or right to health are of accessibility, non-discrimination, availability of facilities, equal treatment. So those are some of the issues which come along with right to health. And right to health obviously is a human rights, as the Supreme Court of India has time and again said that it is one of the most important rights. And it says right at the top, right? The other questions, as you can see on the screen, and other questions that you're going to discuss again relates to right to trade, which is because one of the very important aspect when we discuss tobacco control and as human rights is another, there is an opposite to it, which is tobacco industry. So we are not talking about violation in terms of general practice of society, or general in terms of systemic violation of rights and other things. But here you have a commercial and vested interest, which you are talking about. So it is the tobacco industry that actually is infringing, is the lead in infringing this right, and our constitution.
Yeah, just want to reiterate the fact which you are pointing out, and why I'm interviewing you in this stage, because you have rightly pointed out right to health, which is really important, which can be there in the court of law, that it is tobacco control is infringing the right to health because it is killing so many of people. So what can be the role of judiciary specifically? Like what can a judiciary do? Because we have Justice Iqbal here. So what can judiciary do in India in tackling these human rights violations specifically?
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that very specific question. I think judiciary has played a very important role in India, and if we look at in terms of a smoker, in terms of living in a smoke-free environment, and the Supreme Court in 2001 in Murli Devra very clearly said that exposure to secondhand smoke is a violation of right to life. Very clearly saying that you can't expose somebody else to your smoke, and it is violation of their fundamental human right to life. And similar observation have been done by Justice Kurup in Kerala in 1997-98, and he also said that it is very in terms of a stark violation of human rights when you expose somebody to secondhand smoke. And I think going there on, even when we got COTPA, cigarettes and other tobacco products in 2003, it was challenged by the tobacco industry time and again, and it is the courts of the country which have actually helped. And I think the highest court, the Supreme Court of India, has really paved the way for implementation of the tobacco control laws in India. We have seen, in terms of sometimes what happens, again, this is the fight between right to commercial interest or right to trade, and in terms of very in terms of myopic observation of commercial and trade rights vis-a-vis health rights, which have led to certain high courts deciding against some of these issues. I can give example of Karnataka High Court, which in terms of decided against the pictorial health warning recently. And we have some judgments on in terms of gutka ban initially. If you remember, I think if you go back to the history in 2002, 2003, there was this that was contrary. So all the high courts in the country, they agreed that ban on pan masala and gutka at that point of time was under the PFA Act, and they banned no sale of gutka and pan masala everywhere. Whereas Supreme Court decided otherwise, suggesting that that kind of right was with the central government only and not with the state government. Now, and that's what happened, and I think that paved the way for amending the food safety. You know, when we had the new law, which was Food Safety Standards Authority Act, you know, Food Safety and Standards Act, and then authority came out with regulations suggesting that all products, all food products, you know, they should be free from tobacco and nicotine. Basically, banning any kind of mixing of tobacco and nicotine with food products. So I think that, you know, in terms of, again, as an outcome of judicial interventions at the high courts and at the Supreme Court. So I think they have very important role, very significant role. You know, and I think they should prioritize and they should understand that when we are talking about tobacco in any form, so which could be smoking form, smokeless form, local and vernacular form of tobacco, which is tiny and simple tobacco leaves, which are sold and used by unsuspecting minors and in terms of vulnerable population groups. I think the courts have a very important role to identify that right of individuals, to live healthy life, right to not infringe the high standards of health, because tobacco use in any form and in any quantity, how so little it is, it is harmful to the health of that individual.
Right.
Most of the time, it is the minors. See, the point is, a kid start using tobacco, not an adult. No, you start using tobacco as a kid, as a minor, and then you can become an addict. Anyone who starts after attaining the age of 21 to 24, he doesn't become an addict. It's just a fashion or in terms of a choice, matter of choice for him. But it is not a choice for a minor. It is forced, compelled addiction that is distributed by the person who is selling, person who is manufacturing, person who is producing tobacco. So I think courts should understand that dynamics and take appropriate, or in terms of when they have an opportunity to make these judgments and make these observations, they could side with the right to health of people, which is a fundamental right.
Right.
Whereas right to trade is not a fundamental right without, in terms of, it's not an absolute fundamental right. You can impose limitations on trade, which is, time and again have been said.
Right. So coming to the same, thanks Amit, thanks for, I think, very elaborately telling about what can be the role, what role judiciary has played right now, what role can be played by judiciary. I'll come over to Mr. Ranjit and then Dr. Pankaj on the same question, that considering the fact that judiciary has played a very vital role in the past and have passed few judgments in favor of human rights, what additional role can a judiciary play in tackling human rights violation on tobacco industry, by tobacco industry, or a tobacco use? So first to Ranjit and then Dr. Pankaj on the same questions.
Yes. So I think my previous speakers have put it very properly in place, especially Amit and Dr. Rana and Dr. Meera. This kind of discussion is very huge, and there are so many aspects and angles involved, and so we can be derailed. So we need to be very careful as to what we are discussing here, because these kind of discussion also happens about two decades back when when COTPA was coming into effect. So what is it that we are moving towards? So what is exactly, when we talk about human rights basically enjoyment of your physical and mental right to the utmost. That's the basic and core principle. Now we already have substantial data, which Dr. Rana also pointed out, on the health, economic, ecological, environmental damages that is caused. So that aspect is already settled, that yes, it's violation. Now the role of judiciary also recognizing it, that this thing, it's violation of human right. Yes, it's time and again we have had judgments from the early 90s to till date. We have had several judgments where they have said that right to health is an integral part of right to life, and tobacco use, tobacco trade, etc. Is violation of right to life. And that's how you had the first ban coming up of using tobacco in toothpaste. Then the second ban coming up of using tobacco in public places. Then 85% warning being upheld by the Supreme Court. So these are developments that judiciary have been taking. What we need to see is, when you talk about the covenant, which Dr. Sonu also pointed out, whether it's your, international covenant on, social economical rights, or the what what Amit was saying about, a covenant on racial discrimination, on women discrimination, all of them talk about right to health. So is right to health? Do we need to look at the international covenant, or do we look into our own constitutional provision? I would go for the constitutional provision. Why? Because we still, unlike your other rights. So when you talk about racial discrimination, or women discrimination, the international this thing is very clear. They say elimination. But when you come on to tobacco, it's tobacco control. So when you talk about right to health and you want to put a long scale restriction on it, you need to be very clear as to what you want and where can you derive the power from. The judiciary will only give you if you chalk down that this is what the, because they will not get into the policy. You need to simply point out that what is it violating, which provision it is violating. And if they have time and again held it, that it is violation of Article 21 and right to health. And if you see, and then there are other constitutional provision also, Article 47, which is talks about improvement of health, Article 39, which talks about protecting the tender age of children. So there are already rights. You need to come to to the judiciary as to this is our policy, and this is and we need protection. And they have time and again protected you, whether it is your banning smoking in public places, whether it is 85 your pictorial health warnings, or your chewing tobacco ban also. In fact, the best example would be alcohol ban. So you have time and again had states banning alcohol, and you've had judicial support right from the 70s, saying that this is for improvement of public health, and this is the state duties, and this is and then talking about Article 21 of the Constitution of India. So these rights are already there. The judiciary have been supporting it. What is it that we need to stress on is basically, I would take you back to 2001. And if I must tell you that we need to present a policy. So we need to present, suppose we need to, we need to approach, in fact, Dr. Pankaj would highlight in his talk also, if we want to approach National Human Rights Commission or state him, we need to present that, look, these are the realities, these are the policies, and this is being violated and it's not reaching anywhere. I mean, I'll give you one example. In 2001, Justice J.S. Verma's, under his chairmanship, there was a meeting held in Delhi where they said that, there should be a national policy on tobacco control. They also recommended that the subsidies and incentives that is given to tobacco, farming, trade, the Tobacco Board Act, these all should be taken away. Now that is something, it's 2 decades now, we have not had that. So I think that is when we need to start that, this is contradictory to our policy of tobacco control. So we need to be very clear on that we don't want these. We firstly, the subsidies, the incentives, because you can't have parallel, if you want to have a human right approach, you need to be very clear that this is violating human rights, and therefore you want to have the maximum amount of restrictions on that. And that can only be achieved if you have removed the conflictive this thing. And there are enough provisions in the Indian Constitution. There are enough judicial support. All we need to present, viable and feasible thing, and
going by this,
the government for elimination, rather than just control.
Great. I think a very important statement, Ranjitji, you have given, that we should remove these conflicting boards and conflicting policies, which are actually hindering the laws. And we should have a single line policy. We'll come back to you again. And I think I'll go to Dr. Pankaj, who has been doing wonderful work in not only in the clinical sector, but also in the public health, which we say that we are public health people, but he has been steering a lot of actions in public health. So want to come to the same question to Dr. Pankaj is like Mr. Ranjit was telling about removing conflicting boards, conflicting policies, making a national policy on tobacco control. So how far is it feasible, and how far we can reach up to where we can have this human rights thing into our COTPA, into the international treaties like FCTC. So how far is it possible, and how we can go ahead with it? Dr. Pankaj.
Yeah, thank you, Sonu. So basically, I'm a cancer surgeon in a Tata Memorial Hospital, which is a Government of India hospital. And I'm joining from my office in Operation Theatre. So let me tell you, I operated this morning a 37-year-old young man who started having tobacco at the age of 22. He got his first cancer at the age of 27. He got his second cancer at the age of 30. He got his third cancer at the age of 36. He has 2 children. He has his entire family. He has his parents who are constantly crying outside the operation theater. He has 2 children whose future is insecure because this surgery is going to be very advanced. The family is completely drained out of their resources. The wife is completely insecure because she does not know whether the husband will survive. Now, why I'm telling this, for a moment, and I'm sorry if I sound angry or cynical, because I come from a background where I'm seeing these people die every day. And for a moment, let us assume that there was no constitution, there was no human rights convention. Don't you think any civilized society on its own merit cannot allow a product which has a warning that it causes cancer, and those graphic images, which are my images, which are there on every cigarette packet? How can a consumer product be made a fast moving consumer good product, a profitable product designed only to kill a human being? Isn't it a gross human right violation? Aren't we as a society behaving uncivilized where we are not able to protect our own children? And let me tell you, if tobacco industry is a $1 billion industry, tobacco control industry is also $1 billion. That means the world is spending in tobacco, the world is spending in tobacco control, and we have been discussing this for last 30 years, how to control tobacco, and I see no end to it. We continue to have discussions, webinar, conferences. For me, this industry has got only 2 founding principles. One is political support and second is legal support. If legal support is taken away from this industry will collapse. I have stood in many high court arguments. Best lawyers world over, the best lawyers in India, they are all for tobacco industry. And any simple matter, like I said, that it is clear-cut human right violation that 1/3 of the tobacco users will die prematurely. We are talking about 13.5 million deaths in India. We are talking about 1 billion deaths in this century. We are talking about cancer, heart attack being caused by this product. Of course, if this legal support was not there, then this was an open and shut case, and we would always have tobacco roadmap, phase out, planned by the government, and we will finish. Imagine polio eradication, malaria eradication, kala azar eradication, tuberculosis eradication. When we come to tobacco, which is killing 13.5, 2 times more than tuberculosis, we say use the word control. That means we have already conceded the defeat when it comes to tobacco. Indeed, it's a human right violation, be it environmental, economic, and all that. That 36-year-old man certainly needs somebody to protect not only him, but his family on the garb of the entire human right violation. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think it's a really empathetic statement, and like Dr. Pankaj, who has been working extensively in cancer surgery, and we work in public health, we used to see people dying due to tobacco in front of us, and Dr. Pankaj used to see almost 3 or 4 people and even more every day, which is so it is basically violating human right. And he has rightly put one statement, which I quote again. strongly he has put that we should withdraw the legal support. We should withdraw the legal support of tobacco industry in support of human rights violation. So I think that is a question which we'll be putting towards the end to our chief guest. I think that's a very important point which Dr. Pankaj has rightly put forward to. So I think I'll hand over this thing to Dr. Rakesh to pose the questions to our rest of the panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sonu. And Dr. Pankaj has made very valid points. And he has been extensively working on especially the smokeless tobacco and pan masala and how they violate the human rights. So he has very vividly spoken about it. So thank you, Dr. Pankaj, for being with us. And now, next slide. So now,
Rakesh, only one
yeah.
point I wanted to add.
Sure,
if I may.
Sure, you may. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Rakesh, I'm not the legal luminary, but I have been reading, the Constitution, and also because I have been assisting very senior lawyers and solicitor generals on this matter. So, whatever little I knew about this law, it is by interacting with Amit and Ranjit and the senior lawyers. Please understand that for me, our preamble of the Constitution, which ensures justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. This is the preamble. And this business, tobacco business, and what happens to people who are using tobacco, it is complete violation of the preamble of the Constitution. I'm not going into, different articles and sections and all that. Imagine I treat around 10,000 cancers every year, head and neck cancer, but in India, we have around 3 million cancers diagnosed every year. 13.5 million deaths are happening every year. When these people get cancer, stroke, heart attack, or disability, it deprives them of social justice and economic justice because they are disabled, they are deprived, and they are pushed into poverty. People with their jaws removed, people their throat removed, people their lungs removed because of their tobacco-related cancer. In no way they can have the social and economic, equality. Similarly, mouth cancer, tongue cancer. When you remove the tongue of someone, where is the liberty of thought expression? There is no liberty of expression when somebody's jaw and voice box is removed. Similarly, these people who become addicts, please understand, 27 crore or maybe 30 crore people in India are tobacco addicts. And for them, they think of only one thing: nicotine, nicotine, nicotine. They are the slaves of tobacco industry. You give them any information, they are not able to live. So there is no liberty of thought. And certainly, so many people are they don't have the equality of status of opportunity because they get disabled. They lose their job. When somebody goes to their office with the jaw removed, people run away from that. That man I had a patient who was a salesman for water purifier. Once I did surgery for him, he lost his job because when he went to any house with his jaw disfigured and disabled, people just, not buy that product. And lastly, the fraternity and assurance of dignity of the individual. Where is the dignity of an individual and the relatives of the individual who have suffered from cancer once they get into this disfigurement? Thank you.
Dr. Pankaj, so I agree completely with your observations. And I'm sure our honorable chief guest will also agree with all the observations made by all the panelists. And so now I'll be asking Madam Radhika Srivastava. So ma'am, what can be the role of civil society and public health organizations on this issue of human rights and tobacco?
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta, for giving me this opportunity. I think, given, being one of the last speakers, I thought that, since I think all of us around the table here do represent civil society in some capacity or the other, just a couple of points, and I'm cognizant of the time, and I'll try and wrap this up in no more than 5 minutes. But I think from the perspective of civil society, I think to put it in a nutshell, I think the role is to highlight the human aspect of human rights. Now, this human aspect broadly encompasses those who claim the right, as well as those whose duty it is to fulfill those rights. Um, and both these parties are equally important. And I think from the context of tobacco control, there is in our country a need to create a more stronger public narrative around human rights perspective of tobacco control, and I'll speak to that in the next couple of minutes, and and the important role that civil society plays in that aspect. There is a lot to be learnt and adapted from other areas of public health, such as the HIV/AIDS movement, or even the recently, movement of NCD prevention and control. Again, within which tobacco control is a major driver. Um, Current prevention and control efforts rely primarily on the individual. So it is, we are always talking from a, when it comes to capacity building or empowerment, we are putting the onus on the individual in terms of their behavior or their lifestyle approach to be changed, or in this case, remain tobacco free, or if they are a tobacco user, to quit tobacco use in case, they want to lead a healthy life. However, I think what is also equally important is for us to have a more organized and structural approach to human rights in terms of making the state and policymakers equally critical components of this equation. And I think the human rights approach, when we're talking about, we've spoken about state obligations, but I think I would like to talk to a little more about the meaningful engagement of civil society. And in terms of that role, I think, there are multiple stakeholders involved and multiple sectors involved within civil society. So it is not just the typical NGO who is, classically said that, your role is awareness generation or community mobilization. There is much more when it comes to civil society, and within civil society, there are different layers as well. So again, I think one of the critical roles that civil society does play is providing those linkages and bridges with other sectors and other stakeholders, particularly, for example, in areas such as non-communicable disease and sustainable development goals. But these I mention only a few. I mention only a few here. There are many, many more. And so in the interest of time, I'm not going into those details. Again, civil society has the potential to highlight tobacco control from a social justice and social protection issue. And I started by saying that there is a need to create a more robust public narrative around this. And then another important aspect, and I'm so glad that Dr. Pankaj Chaturvedi started off by highlighting the voice of the voiceless, if I may put it in that sense. And people who are affected by tobacco, and when I say people affected by tobacco, not only just the users, but also the ones who are at risk of using tobacco, or who are, of course, like Dr. Rana very comprehensively talked in his presentation about that whole cycle of, right from the production or when, say cultivation of the tobacco plant up until, its advertising, promotion, and even its usage. So I think these stakeholders, need a position on the decision making table. Now, for example, civil society can be a facilitator, but I think our ultimate goal, and we have had definitely some very strong examples such as BOTV and many, many more, where we have positioned the actual stakeholders in the midst of decision makers. But I think that is something from a human rights perspective, that is something that definitely needs more strengthening, in the sense that, handing over the reins to really the people who are affected, and we as civil society really providing a more supportive role. Again, Dr. Agi has very clearly pointed out about, civil society being able to play a role to highlight the issues which, in terms of the vulnerable groups, now whether it is women, whether it is children, LGBTQI communities, whether it is even just the low socioeconomic communities, again, that is something that is definitely on the onus of civil society. And I think while I make these points, I'd like to highlight that if we want tobacco control to be successfully recognized as a human rights issue, there is a need for stronger cohesive action between various sectors of civil society. So it is not just the tobacco control linked civil society who will be able to do this. We definitely need to reach out. Another important aspect is accountability, and which is the cornerstone of a rights-based approach. So then, civil society can hold stakeholders to account in fulfilling their obligations. And when we say that, it is a two-way equation. We've all most of the panelists here have been in tobacco control for decades now, right? We have spoken about, and we know where we were, say 15, 20 years back to where we have reached now. And I think capacity building of law enforcers or even civil society has been a key driver in where we have reached in tobacco control today. I think those capacity building efforts also need to integrate human rights as a critical component. Again, in terms of so for example, issues like access, I think that is a critical aspect of a human rights approach, is of access. And so whether it is access to information, whether it is access to treatment for tobacco control dependence or cessation services, again, that is something which is critical. Another point that Dr. Pankaj Chaturvedi highlighted, and I'd like to reiterate that, is that you cannot have a human rights approach to tobacco control without addressing issues which are related to societal issues related to stigma and discrimination. And I think that is again a role that civil society plays. And to sum it up, I think another very important role is to from the research perspective, generate evidence through multidimensional research to inform tobacco control action. So these are just some of the points that I've highlighted, and happy to discuss further. Thank you. Dr. Gupta, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Radhika. You have very precisely told us about the role of civil society and public health organizations also on this issue. And I think we will incorporate all the suggestions, all the viewpoints of the panelists in the representation we are preparing for National Human Rights Commission and for the Punjab Human Rights Commission as well. So, Dr. Sonu, can we have a group photograph of all the panelists? So, can you all switch on the videos? Please switch on the videos. Well, Rajiv, can you click the photograph?
Yes, sir. Just a minute.
Yeah. So, Honorable Chief Guest is also there? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, have a snapshot. So, is it taken?
Yes, yes.
Just a minute. Done, sir. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Sona. I think we can now invite our Honorable Chief Guest.
So we can have release of report by our chief guest followed by his address.
I think it is after that, maybe. It's one and the same.
Yeah, so
I think whatever way you want,
Before that, can I ask a question?
Ma'am, 1 minute, ma'am. I think we will have that question answer in case we are not able to address that. So because our chief guest, I think there might be some commitments. So
Okay.
yes. So I think let us go for the, I think, Rajiv, can you put that report? So just want to share that we hold the curtain raiser of 5th National Conference on Tobacco or Health, virtual conference, curtain raiser. So we held it in the month of September, last 25th to 26th September. And we are actually holding the main conference is next year. But this was the report which was made of the curtain raiser. And I think I would like to use this opportunity where all our eminent people are here to release this report. So everybody here can say release, and then I think the report will be released. Everybody can unmute themselves.
Release.
So release.
Release.
So I think this was the 100-pager report. I think total page are around 94. So it contains all the summary of the 2 days event which was held, and we had around 650 plus gathering in this virtual curtain raiser of the 5th National Conference on Tobacco or Health. So this shows that the interest in tobacco control is on the rise, and people want to work in this subject. And that's why we are raising this human rights issue through this particular webinar. So thank you all. And I think now I invite our chief guest of the occasion, and I invite Dr. Rakesh to introduce our chief guest, followed by address of the chief guest.
Rajiv, can you put up the slides? So I welcome Honorable Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari, who is our chief guest. And Honorable Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari, he joined as chairperson of the Punjab State Human Rights Commission on 1st of August 2017 for full term of 5 years. He is a former Chief Justice of Patna High Court. He underwent training on the subject of gender and law in a university in UK, on being nominated by National Judicial Academy headed by Chief Justice of India. He was a judge in charge, Northeast Judicial Officers Training Institute, with the responsibility of training judicial officers. He has presented papers and delivered lectures in many seminars all over the country. He, on being nominated by the Chief Justice of India, attended Judicial Governance Program in Singapore. He chaired the session on corporate criminal liability at the Commonwealth Lawyers Conference. And Justice Ansari is known for a combination of law for liberty and passion for justice, and to his credit has the privilege of being one of the judges in the country having the highest number of reported judgments, which are very often quoted as authorities in judicial proceeding. So sir, we are honored to have you with us. So we'll like to listen from you about the issue. Thank you.
Unmute करना हो ना? Unmuted. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My Wi-Fi connection is creating problems, so I don't know how well I would be able to communicate myself. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very conscious of the fact that I am in the presence of very eminent personalities, very educative and informative in their own respective fields, and more particularly in the field of public health. We start with the limitation, and the limitation is tobacco control and not eradication or elimination of tobacco. So if we want to go a step further, then perhaps the workshop has to be on that subject. In any case, let us first try and understand what we call as human rights. We must understand that we have two kinds of rights. Rights which are created by law and rights which are inherent in a person. Rights are created by law, say for instance, right to stand for election. You can't just stand for election. There has to be right available to you And then only you can stand for election and get elected. There are qualifications attached to that. So far as the natural rights are concerned, say for instance, one shall not be a judge on his own cause. That need not be in writing. As a human being, we understand that I cannot be a judge in my own cause where some allegation is made against me. I cannot sit and decide that allegation, which of course was very highly projected at the time of the last Chief Justice of India's office, when a woman working in the registry had raised some questions or made some allegations against him with regard to outraging her modesty. Now we must understand that as far as human rights are concerned, these are not dependent on Universal Declaration of Human Rights or on the Magna Carta or such other convention or charter. Human rights stand independent of all this. It is not that it is only with Universal Declaration of Human Rights that we have got human rights. No. We had human rights, we have human rights. The only question is when and how much the society recognizes that right. How much acknowledgement does the society give? Law, as you all know, ladies and gentlemen, is an instrument for governance of society. It creates the right, it creates the obligation, it creates the duty. And these laws are never static. They keep changing. And this is what we have to learn from Dr. Pankaj, who has made a very educative and informative presentation. I'm really impressed by him and by all others, of course, including Mr. Ranjit Singh. So because it is with regard to the governance of a society, the law is not static, it keeps changing. Because our perception, our viewpoints, our outlook keep changing from age to age. I'll give you a very simple example. In United Kingdom, the definition of rape was, if you will kindly consider this definition, an unlawful sexual intercourse by a man with a woman without her consent or against her will. I am repeating, an unlawful sexual intercourse by a man with a woman without her consent or against her will. The question arose whether within this definition, if a husband has sex with his wife without her consent or against her will he be held responsible for rape? The answer of the UK court was no, because this word unlawful has to be read outside the institution of marriage, on account of the fact that by marriage the woman surrenders herself to the husband. This was the viewpoint, right or wrong. Time passed, the perception of the society changed, the outlook changed, their viewpoints changed. And when the same question was raised, this time the court answered in a different way, rather opposite. It said, gone are those days when men and women were not equal partners. So in the institution of marriage today, they are equal partners. And therefore, there is no reason to read this word unlawful outside the institution of marriage. And if you read this word unlawful within the institution of marriage, it will mean that if a husband has sex with his wife without her consent or against her will, he will still be held responsible for rape. So ladies and gentlemen, you will find that the law is not changed. Perception of the society has changed. And that is precisely what we need to do so far as the control of the tobacco is concerned. Because we have been fighting in different ways, legislatively, maybe state or central government's policies, judicial activism. These are all with regard to control of tobacco. How do we control the use of tobacco? Not that we completely finish the use of tobacco. With the result, we don't make penal the very act of smoking, unlike drug. Now, the other important aspect is that we are all talking about the right to life, which under our Constitution is guaranteed, and we consider it as a human right, and Supreme Court so pronounces. It says no person shall be deprived of his life and liberty except according to the law prescribed. The law prescribed at one point of time was thought that is enough to have a law. And if there is any legal provision, action should be taken accordingly. You will be surprised that even our Supreme Court referred to a case of UK at one point of time where a person was required to be thrown into burning oil in case he was found guilty. So such a barbaric law was also referred to by our Supreme Court while saying that there is a law to support the action of the government. Later journey of the Supreme Court has shown that we have reached a stage where we say, and that perhaps will come to our use, is that it is not enough to have a law. That law must be just, fair, and reasonable. So any test of the law to be constitutional has to be just, fair, and reasonable. If the law is not just, if the law is not fair, if the law is unreasonable, then that law cannot be a valid law. Now, Supreme Court makes it clear, and rightly so, that animal existence is not living like a human being. What Dr. Pankaj has pointed out, the kind of sight which a person operated after tobacco consumption and having suffered the consequences of that face in public places, including the workplace, if he has any. So imagine the plight of a person. He has a smoker. He has become a victim of maybe cancer or anything. He becomes a burden on the family. The family is devastated. He is himself ruined. And more so, he finds himself that yes, he is being despised by the human society. And there comes the responsibility of the civil society. It is the civil society which has to give him the kind of a support which is needed. We need two kinds of supports. One is the legal support, means the policies and the legislation which the government makes. The second is the judicial support. Now, judicial support will come only in the light of the legal support. If you do not have the provision in the law banning or making itself smoking as an offense, there is no question of any judiciary coming forward and completely stopping. So the smoking will continue. So what we are discussing is a situation where we know the smoking will continue, how far we will be able to control, because it violates the person's human right. And there is the reason for us to make aware the civil society, because it is the civil society which can make, because as we have heard, one of the speakers have spoken, maybe Mr. Ranjit Singh, I don't exactly recall, that under the Food Safety Act, there was an amendment made of the Food Safety Act so far as the tobacco is concerned. Because remember, food, by no stretch of imagination, tobacco can be a food. You can't imagine that I will eat tobacco and live. It is not, I also know that it's not a food. So mixing of a tobacco with food, yes, that can be, that adulteration by itself will be hazard to food safety. But if we call tobacco itself as a food, then obviously judiciary has to step in and say that no, you have no business to declare tobacco as a food. Now, as far as the pictorial projections are concerned, the Supreme Court now, as Mr. Ranjit Singh has pointed out, sustained the government's policy of depiction 85% bar to the use of tobacco, and that is what very much necessary for all of us, because many a times tobacco is a step towards consumption of drugs like cannabis. We have to stop this somewhere. So, as I said, the law keeps changing, and many a times, even when the law remains the same, the judicial interpretation changes. Let us hope that either the judicial interpretation changes or the government become, because we are facing a situation which we can call it, it's a dichotomy, and very strange that on the one hand we encourage tobacco industry, we give them subsidy, we give them support, we give them financial assistance from all financial institutions, and on the other hand we tell the people, don't smoke, don't chew tobacco. This dichotomy has to be resolved by the society, and the sooner we resolve, better it is for the human beings, not only in India but all over the world. It has been a very, very impressive webinar, I must say. For me, it has proved to be very informative and educative. All of you have really given your best, and I must thank the Strategic Institute of Public Health and Education and Research. I consider it a privilege for being invited to be amongst you at the time of such an important discussion by this webinar. But before I conclude, let me thank you from the core of my heart, all of you ladies and gentlemen who have been with me long after the time is over. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. So we'll be in touch with you and seek your advice for preparing the representation for the National Human Rights Commission. So, sir, we'll meet you soon in your office. Thanks a lot, sir. And over to Mr. Arun Verma.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rakesh, and thank you so much, Chief Guest, sir, for a very excellent address enhancing our knowledge on the role of law and how the perception and interpretation. Now I request Mr. Rajiv Gupta to propose a vote of thanks to all of us. Over to Rajiv. Rajiv.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving this opportunity to propose vote of thanks for this important consultation. So we express our heartfelt gratitude to Honorable Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari for accepting our request for being a chief guest for this national consultation on human rights dimension of tobacco control, hosted jointly by Strategic Institute of Public Health, Education and Research, CIPHER, and E-Resource Center for Tobacco Control under Department of Community Medicine, School of Public Health, PGI, Chandigarh, and the Union Southeast Asia Office, New Delhi. I extend my special thanks to our eminent subject expert, Dr. Meera Biagi, behavioral scientist and communication expert of international repute, Dr. Pankaj Chaturvedi, head neck cancer surgeon and deputy director at Tata Memorial Center, Mumbai, Dr. Rana J. Singh, deputy regional director, tobacco and NCD control at International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Disease, New Delhi, Dr. Amit Yadav, senior technical advisor, International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Disease, New Delhi, Mr. Ranjit Singh, a legal expert, attorney at law in Supreme Court of India, and Ms. Radhika Srivastava, Director Health Promotion at Haride, for inspiring us with their input and sharing on human rights dimension of tobacco control. Dear friends and professionals, an event like this requires immense planning and eye for detail. We are fortunate to be mentored and guided by Dr. Son Goel, Dr. Rakesh Gupta, and Mr. Arun Verma, and backed by the team, a very motivated and dedicated, result-oriented colleagues. I thank the entire organizing team, starting from Dr. Nidhi, Dr. Kritika, Radhika Rana, Surbhi, Kanika, Dr. Priya Goel, Akanksha Gupta, Saurav, Ashdeep, and Anuj and Mahendra Singh for thorough planning and timely execution of the program. At last but not the least, I am thankful to everyone for showing their keen interest in this event, without which none of us would have come this far, and a grand applause for everyone who present here through our YouTube live. So I again request and inform all the participants, please fill the feedback form before leaving these discussions. Please again feel free to reach us on our email ID, rctcupdate@gmail, and logged in also for more information on rctcpgi.org for the more information regarding tobacco control. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Rajiv. And thank you, everyone, for being part of this important national consultation on human rights dimension of tobacco control. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Over
you,
to
sir.
Dr.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Sir. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Radhika.
Ranjit ji, thank you.
हाँ जी रंजीत जी, आपने तो बहुत अच्छा
Very
क्लियर
nice.
कर दिया सिचुएशन काफी क्लियर कर दिया आपने
Very bold,
अमित एंड
very
रंजीत
bold
दोनों ने
statement.
काफी अच्छी तरह से बताई है ये वाली
नहीं